We invent first-time homebuyer communities. In a nutshell, that's what we do. If you've heard of the affordable housing problem in the United States, that's what we're going after. That's what we're trying to solve.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer, ADP. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in. All right, welcome back, Freedom Point podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into another episode of the Freedom Point. So glad you're here with us again today. Thank you for our loyal listeners that continue to binge listen to our episodes. Quite oftentimes I get phone calls from listeners that say, that they didn't have a chance to listen over the last few weeks, but they decided to crank them all out on a weekend. So really appreciate your support there. We're well over 100 episodes now by this point. So, if you do the math on a 25 to 30 minute, episode, we've got, a week and a half worth of listening. So by all means, jump into some of those old episodes, give us a like, a rating, and review. We really appreciate that. I have another amazing guest with me today on the show, Brandon Cobb. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeremy, it's glad to be here, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for joining us and for the tremendous value that I know you'll provide to our listening audience. Brandon comes from HBG Capital. Brandon was a former medical device sales rep before becoming a fund manager. He was in Nashville, Tennessee. And annually, he manages over $22 million plus of new first-time home buyer housing and build-to-rent communities. Brandon, you're a recovering sales guy, much like myself. Talk to us a little bit more about, that kind of transition from, being in medical device sales to now, really actively on the real estate side.
Yeah, so it was something that positioned me really well to doing real estate. Honestly, if you had told me 8 years ago that I would be inventing new communities and blessed to be doing the projects that we're doing, I'd have looked at you like you had 8 heads because I loved what I did. Unlike a lot of people, I don't have this story where I worked in corporate for 20 years, got fed up, and I had this dream to be an entrepreneur. That was not me. I actually don't consider myself a natural entrepreneur. I was the guy in scrubs every single day in the hospitals, working side by side by orthopedic surgeons, training the hospital staff on my product. I actually loved what I did. I felt like I was making a difference in the patient's life every single day. So a lot of intrinsic motivation there. And you got to think, young kid in his 20s, rubbing shoulders with all these established surgeons and being in surgeries every single day. I thought I was the coolest kid on the block. I loved what I did. And one sunny Friday afternoon in June, my boss says, hey, meet me over at Starbucks. And I was coming off one of the best trials I ever had. One of the products that I sold was power equipment. So if you have to go and, drill and saw bones and stuff, like I sold the equipment for that. And I had a successful trial. I also did a lot of implant stuff. And man, let me tell you, that day at the hospital couldn't have gone better because not only did my power trial go well, but all my implants went well as well. It's one of those days where you're just killing it as a rep. And as I pulled up to the Starbucks over on West End, you couldn't help but smell the coffee. And like my excitement was just oozing out of me. And I sit down with my boss. And before I can get this amazing day I had out of my mouth, he fires me. And I'll never forget the shock that I felt that day. I remember thinking, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I've got the Rookie of the Year sales awards. I literally live, breathe, and eat this job. I love what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? And I learned a lesson that day that will carry with me for the rest of my life. And that's that nobody is going to look out for my financial well-being but me. Working for a corporation, another company, it's no hard feelings. They've got to do what's best for them. And so I was a number and it was time to let me go at that point. And so now I'm on a mission to help other people not have to rely on a corporation and to build that passive income with real estate. And so that was kind of the go button. I hit the ready, set, go. I gave myself a 6-month ultimatum. I said, hey, let's try to figure out how to make some money myself before jumping back into the workforce. I was very comfortable with what the worst case scenario was, which was jumping back into the sales force. And man, I started going around putting a lot of those We Buy Houses signs up, found a foreclosure, sold all my retirement accounts, bought it cash, drove an hour and a half every single day. And my first gig that I ever did making money as an entrepreneur in real estate was flipping a house. And I beat my 6-month ultimatum by 8 days.
That's great, Brandon. It's interesting, some of the things that you kind of talk about there. You talk about obviously the importance of having, some form or version of a safety net, because anybody that's got a W-2 job right now, whether you're a salesperson, a doctor, an engineer, et cetera, if you're a W-2 earner, there may become a time in your career where that employer no longer needs your services, right? No matter how valuable you think you are, to that organization, there may be a time there. The other thing that I heard you say is, there's really a lot of transferable skills here, right? I mean, you had some sales skills if you were, crushing it, in your W-2 and your commission and your paycheck and so forth. But now you've been able to take those really skills, that you've built up over the years, and you've been able to transfer them into the real estate business. So my question for you there is really, maybe what were some of those skills, and kind of second to that, maybe what were some of the initial challenges, that you encountered as you stepped away from the W-2 and now into full-time active real estate?
Well, let me tell you, because of the competitiveness that it takes to succeed in medical device sales, it's a very, very competitive field. It really primed me to do well doing business to consumer sales. So I was B2B. I was calling on a lot of orthopedic surgeons, and I was switched over to doing business consumer. Now, 15 years ago, I actually first cut my teeth doing door-to-door sales, selling ADT home protection systems door-to-door. And so I had a little bit of business to consumer sales. I learned a lot of what I needed to build that foundation, and doing medical device sales really just smoothened out a lot of the edges. And so, for example, what I really struggled with was lead flow at first. And so once I figured out how to generate some leads, there were a lot of skills that I took from sales and was able to apply to the B2 consumer industry. So number one is just being a little bit better than everybody else. I love Brian Tracy's concept that in sales, you don't have to be eons better than everybody else to win. He compares it to a horse race. That first place racehorse actually makes 17 times more money than the second place racehorse. But if you look at how much quicker it is, it's fractions of a second. So knowing that I only needed to be a little bit better than the next guy made a huge difference. So before I would leave a lot of those appointments with consumers, these people that had houses or land that they wanted to sell, I'd always do a handwritten thank you card and I would drop it in the mailbox. I knew that a lot of people were not doing that. And that was kind of like you had to do that in medical device sales, right? Bare minimum. I would find creative ways to follow up with people without being annoying, rather than, hey, it's Brandon again. I was just at your house or saw your piece of land, just following up, did you get my message? It was doing a good job of really digging in during that call to understand what the needs were of the clients, and not just the pain points of the business, for example, like, they want to sell their land, they got some pain points there, but what are the pain points in their personal life? And so digging those out. One time I discovered after digging in that there was this sweet old lady in Murfreesboro, and she wanted to sell the house, and we talked about that in the price. But I dug down. I'm like, well, what's bothering you on a personal level? I asked that magic question. If you could just wave a magic wand and have this unfold the way you want it, how do you see this going? And she said, man, to be honest, my kids don't talk to me, and I have nobody to move me to Georgia where I'm going. Ding, 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 ding. Once I discovered that and I was able to solve that problem for her, the price of the home was really irrelevant. That's what she was really focusing on. And so I was able to dig down and actually solve the real pain point, which really had nothing to do with the price of the home or how many repairs or whatever that. It was being able to get her where she needed to go. So being very thorough with my needs assessment and discovering the true reasons for that. And as far as the follow-up goes, I remember, with this specific example, she'd kind of told me there was some trouble with like her kids and stuff. So I would follow up with her and I would send her articles on kind of how to mend things with the kids. Again, following up, but following up in a unique way that gave her an opportunity to elicit feedback to me and not be annoying. Those are just a few things that I was able to implement. And another big one I would say is disarming future sales resistance. Getting the client comfortable with telling you no. The worst thing you want to hear as a sales rep is, let me think about it, or maybe. So starting those sales calls with, hey, I just want to let you know that off the get-go here, I can tell that, we're going to be friends no matter what. So I want to make sure that knowing we're going to be friends no matter what is the worst case scenario. Do you feel comfortable giving me a no today if this isn't a fit? Perfect. Great. Let's move forward now. Those are a couple little tricks that I would use from medical sales that I carried over into the business consumer industry.
Brandon, you just gave a master class on Sales 101. So that wasn't the intent of our episode here today. It was more to talk about real estate. But that said, you knocked the skin off the ball. You talked a lot about, how important relationships are, that they matter, that you're really here to solve people's pain points, and identifying what those pain points are sometimes is the biggest, challenge, that anybody would have in entering into a transaction with someone else. Obviously the importance of following up and disarming the potential prospect, right? And really, helping assist and really dropping that guard so you can have a genuine, meaningful conversation. So really appreciate that. That said, I want to transition now over onto the real estate side. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of what you're doing in the real estate space today? I believe it's related to land, but it might be single family home ownership. Maybe let's chop that up a little bit.
Yeah. So we invent first-time homebuyer communities. In a nutshell, that's what we do. If you've heard of the affordable housing problem in the United States, that's what we're going after. That's what we're trying to solve. And let me be clear. When I say affordable housing, I'm not saying Section 8 or government housing. I'm talking about that first home that people are buying. Right now, you have 33% of the home buying population that needs to purchase their first home. These are millennials that are having kids, they're having families, they want to buy a home, but less than 10% of the homes being constructed are affordable to them. And when I say affordable, I'm talking about a $2,300 to $2,600 per month mortgage payment. That puts your home somewhere in the mid, 300s, low 300s, depending on what your down payment is. So what we do is we partner with our investor partners. We raise capital and we go after land and we get it approved for these beautiful new communities, 50, 100, 150 homes. We take it through the entire process of getting it approved. And then we will either sell that land, we will develop and sell it to a national home builder, usually the Lennars, the D.R. Hortons of the world, or we will develop, build it ourselves and sell the homes. And so we have 3 different exit strategies that we underwrite for our investors. And similar to the multifamily world, there's got to be a value add strategy. And what's different is we don't do anything. We do not buy that land until we have force appreciated the value of it. And how do we do that? We rezone it or we get it approved. And so we're taking parcels of land that are maybe worth $500,000 to $800,000 because you can only put like 1 or 2 homes on it. And it's just a lot of acreage, to taking it to 50, 100 homes and we're making it worth $2 or $3 million. And we do that all before we buy it. And so we put it under contract. We personally spend the money to do all the civil engineering and sweat equity to get it approved with the city. And then after we force appreciated, we contact our investor partners, we buy that land, and we execute on what the business strategy is.
What would you say are maybe 1 or 2 of the most creative ways that you guys are able to force value?
Rezoning it, taking a piece of land from like agricultural, like there's a farm and you're going in, you're installing all the sewer, you're putting all the roads in. That's creating a lot of value. Before you even do that though, taking it from 1 or 2 homes itself, there's really 3 ways to increase the value. One is you just get it approved for 50, 100, 200 homes. Automatically, it's worth a lot more money. The second way that you again can force appreciate it is if you would then install all the roads, the water, the utilities, everything in it. Now it's worth even more. You can build a home on it. And then the third way, obviously, to force appreciate is to actually put the house on it and build it. All real estate starts with the land.
Let's talk about the accessory dwelling unit space. What are you seeing right now in that space? We hear a lot about ADUs. We hear about states like California that are lifting, legislation and regulations to allow people to add, ADU units to their existing, properties and so forth. What's the trend in that space today? Is it, companies out there that are looking to manufacture ADU units that look like, travel trailers, or I know there's companies out there like Boxable, maybe you've heard of them before as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're trying to manufacture ADU units on an assembly line, right? So talk to us a little bit more about that particular segment. Where do you see the areas of opportunity and growth, and how does that kind of fit, with the strategy that you guys are deploying?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the ADUs are not a part of our strategy. It looks like that has evolved out of a need for these extremely high dense, developed, very mature cities to be able to provide more affordable housing and just housing in general. If you look at areas like New York or California, Los Angeles, San Diego, they are packed. There's no more land to develop. And so as a result of that, the cities have to get creative. They say, okay, well, how do we continue to increase tax revenue? Because tax revenue has got to come from somewhere. You can't just, wave a magic wand and dollar bills to appear. And how do we address these affordable housing crises that we've got all over the nation? And these accessory dwelling units, they are a means to an end. It solves a real need here. I think it's more for the more mature, high density metropolises and not for your high growth cities. Like in Nashville, there's people who do accessory dwelling units here. I'm familiar with it. Certain areas have like that zoning, but it's more or less like a family that wants to create a little space to rent out above their garage, right? It's not solving like a big need. And so where I'm at, there is still tons of land that we can develop. I mean, it's wide open here. And so as the nation continues to grow, we're going to need more of that housing product. The ADU stuff in California, it's not part of our strategy, but I do think it solves a big need when it comes to the affordable housing if the city is set up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that, when I think about city and I think about regulations and kind of zoning requirements and a lot of that red tape maybe that you have to kind of move your way through, outside of that, when it comes to managing risk in your construction projects, how do you manage that risk, especially considering the fact that the market is fluctuating right now very differently than it historically, maybe has in the past?
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways. Number one, multiple exit strategies. Number two, controlled debt. Number three, you've got to have the ability to hang on this thing long term. Number four, forced asset appreciation. Number five, having your exit lined up pre-contract is nice. And then six, plenty of downside protection. So what does that look like in regards to our specific strategy? One, I've kind of gone over the multiple exit strategies, right? We underwrite everything where if exit strategy number one, entitling and selling the land doesn't work, let's say we get stuck with it. Well, we've got a piece of land that we just force appreciated. Let's develop it, put the roads and infrastructure in, find a builder who wants to finish pads and then sell it. Let's say we do that and then the builder backs out. Well, we own a bunch of lots that are free and clear with our investors that has tons of additional equity because of everything we've done to it. Let's go ahead and let's build the homes. And I'm working on a fourth one, which is build to rent. We're trying to get that to pencil. So that's how we're doing the first. The second is controlled debt. We do 100% equity deals with our investors up until going vertical. Once we go vertical, we then will introduce the debt piece of it with banks. But up until that point, it's all 100% equity. We bought a piece of land that was approved for 74 homes in September of 2022. Worst time we could have bought. Everybody was freaking out, right? Interest rates had just done a black swan event, fastest rise ever. And we bought that with investor funds as equity partners, no monthly payments, no debt from the bank where they could call the note due. We were fine. We sat on it, and we did that with all of our parcels. Had we bought it with bank debt and had those payments, we would have been in trouble. We hung on to it for a year and a half, and we are now developing those 74 lots for another builder, and we're going to make out great on it. So we had the ability to control the debt in it. And the third is the ability to hold it, right? Terms with your investors, terms with your lender, making sure you've got the ability to hold this thing until the market bounces back. And the fourth, we talked about forced asset appreciation already. I want to buy it after the value is there. And so we put it under contract, we get all the entitlements and rezoning done. And once that's approved, then we go in and buy it. I like walking into equity. Very little do I want to buy something and then have to force appreciate it, though I love investing my own personal money in multifamily syndications. I love that asset class and the runway that it has, but I want to buy it after I force appreciate it. And then, number 5, having the end buyer lined up. A lot of the times when we're exiting these land deals, because it takes so long during the due diligence process to get the approvals from the city and go through all the design, I'm out there shopping it to whoever's going to buy it. And so a lot of times I have eliminated the time risk of the deal because I'm not sitting on it. I'm buying it and then immediately selling it to somebody else, or I've got a contract in place to sell it. And then 6, we talked about the downside protection already.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon, I really appreciate that background. And it makes total sense to me in terms of what the strategy is. It's nice to know that you're kind of beginning, with the end in mind. You've got options, you can pivot from one strategy to another. All makes total sense to me. My question now for you is just as it relates to the listening audience today, let's pretend we've got a new investor that's listening to this podcast episode for the first time. They've never invested in a real estate deal before. All right. What type of advice would you give that investor if they're looking to explore deploying capital and earning a passive return?
Yeah. So 3 things. There's 3 parts here. One is you want to do your research on the sponsor and the operator. A lot of times people are used to dealing with the sponsor, kind of the face, usually the one that's raising the capital. They don't do enough research on the operator a lot of times because sometimes the sponsor will partner with an operator. So making sure you're getting your background checks done, making sure you're getting at least 4, 5, or 6 touch points with that sponsor or that operator, get like a gut feeling on them, looking at their track record. Have they been in business for at least, a decade? Or even better question, how many full cycle deals have you done? Have you ever lost money in a deal? Have you ever filed a bankruptcy? Getting to know who you're giving money to and getting very comfortable with them is 100% what you need to do the first step. Second is analyzing the deal itself. There are a couple key little things that I like to ask without getting super sophisticated. One is ask them, what needs to happen for me to just get my money back? Like, what's the break even event here? What do interest rates have to go up to? How far over budget does it need? How far down does the price of the asset need to fall? Simple question there. What's my break even here just to get my money back? I love that question. Doing the research on the deal doesn't have to be complicated. You just want to understand what you're getting into. I think the biggest mistake people make is they invest in things they really don't understand. They become too comfortable with the person and they don't understand what the risks are with the asset and how they're going to get it back. 3 main things to focus on, right? Capital preservation, making sure that your money doesn't disappear, return on capital, how much is it making me? And then 3, return of capital. Because if it's locked up for 20 years and stuck, what's the point, right? So making sure you're looking at the deal from those 3 lenses. And finally, the third, I would encourage everyone to go to our website, hbgcapital.net, and download our free ebook. It's 100 questions business owners ask before investing. I wrote that book to give people the tools, the questions that they need to ask in order to get the answers they want. Questions unlock the answers you need to make a more informed investing decision. And so being green, not knowing what to ask is where you run into problems. So go arm yourself with the right questions.
That's great. Well, we'll definitely put that link in the show notes for the episode. I did want to ask a couple of kind of wrap up questions, and that is, and I know that you don't have a crystal ball, right? But I'd like to at least get your perspective as to, where we are right now. We're by the time this episode airs, we're the back half now of 2024. So what does the rest of 2024, look like as far as you can tell? And as we move into 2025, where do you see real estate going, at least as it relates to housing communities, multifamily, et cetera?
Yeah, so lots of niches there. Markets and economy affect each differently. I'll speak to what I know. As far as homes go, we're still short. I see volatility for the rest of the year. I'm filling pockets where our housing inventory is moving and then it's not moving. It's volatility. And I think you're going to see that up until the election. Now, depending on who gets elected, That's your big question mark, because we can go down two paths here. If one guy gets elected, I can tell you what I'll think will happen there. And if the other guy gets elected, I'll tell you what I'll think happens there. But I think those are two completely different economies that affect real estate. But right now, I think we've got some volatility for the rest of the year. I think you're going to continue to see distress in the multifamily commercial world with a lot of the bridge debt that's coming due. I think there's going to be some phenomenal buying opportunities for those that are positioned for it. And as far as the housing market goes, I think that the land is going to continue. There's a lot of demand for land right now. What's happened is from June of 2022 to about July of 2023, all the national home builders didn't buy anything. They were waiting to see what was going to happen with interest rates. And they hit the go button again, and they did not buy inventory for almost a year, which means their 2025 and 2026 pro formas are now in jeopardy, and they've got to catch up. So we have seen a ton of demand for finished lots and land, especially that's slated for these affordable housing communities. Whereas our homes per se, it's been a little bit more volatile. That you get these pockets when the interest rates kind of blip down a little bit where stuff really moves. We had a really good spring, but it's volatile. It kind of comes and goes. As of about 3-4 weeks ago, it's been pretty slow. So volatility up until I think the election. After the election, I think things are really going to smoothen out. And again, I could talk about two different perspectives here, depending on who gets elected. But we've been through a pretty major correction in real estate so far. I mean, we're coming up on almost 2 years since things have happened. And if I'm going off of history, historically, we kind of start coming out of the trenches at that point. And so I think the likelihood of us experiencing an upmarket and things erring on the side of positivity has a much greater chance than things continuing or things going down.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your perspective on what you think the future holds in the segment, or as the strategy goes. Totally agree with you, by the way, in terms of your analysis there. I would like to talk about now you personally. What's kind of next on Brandon's bucket list, or what are you focused on for the back half of 2024 and into 25?
Yeah, so we're focused on growing from 20 million to 100 million. And the way to do that is we've been doing a lot of partnerships. We have historically done things all internally, our own general contracting business, our own capital raising business. We source all of our own deals, and we have hit a plateau here. And so we have started doing a lot more partnerships, giving other people a piece of the pie in exchange for their expertise or their deal flow. Like we've started partnering with builders who do it a lot better than we do. And man, we see what the future holds. And so we're very, very excited about the future. We see a very clear path to being able to control 1,000 lots slated for entry-level housing, hopefully building 100 plus homes per year and keeping a percentage of those as build to rent. So the big thing that I want to introduce to our company is introducing the build to rent model and holding on to more assets so that we can capture this depreciation.
That's great. That's great. What would maybe be one or two different ways that our listening audience can connect with you to learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah. So if you're interested in building a legacy, if you're trying to make an impact through creating passive income from real estate, or just, trying to retire and smoothing out the ride, you can go to our website, hbgcapital.net. That's pronounced Harry Bob Gary capital.net. I joke, someone stole the .com, so it is .net, but grab our free ebook there. Again, arm yourself with the right questions. I'll tell you, the reason I wrote that book was I got a call from one of our investors who asked if I would speak to one of his friends who lost all of his money on a real estate deal that he lent to somebody. And after speaking with this individual on the phone, it became evident very quick. The reason that happened was because he was very green and he did not know what questions to ask. He did not have the right paperwork. He didn't secure himself. And I said, if I could just prevent this from happening to one other person, what could I do? And so I put that list of questions together, and you can grab it on there. We've got a ton of other great resources. We've also got our own podcast, Recession Resistant Real Estate Radio, where we interview entrepreneurs and we talk real estate.
That's great. Well, we'll definitely put those in the show notes for the episode here. Brandon, really appreciated the tremendous value you've provided us today, and thanks for your time.
Hey, thank you, man. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. And listening audience, thank you again for jumping into another episode of The Freedom Point. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.